Hello, everyone. Today, on this day, on November 29th in 1942, it was a hard day because that's when coffee rationing began as part of World War II in the United States. Just little corporate America fact you can spit out at the water cooler or the coffee machine here later today or tomorrow if you want to show your history prowess. So welcome to the Tuesday 3 p.m. Career Mastermind call. We do this every week. We do this at 3 p.m. Pacific time, and it's really an opportunity for you to meet other people in corporate America who are working to better themselves, to find resources, to get ideas, and to get some coaching if you want it on the sorts of things you're trying to accomplish, the type of career you're trying to build, or your corporate goals or your career goals, that sort of thing. So we're going to start off with about 10 to 15 minutes talking about the main topic for today, and then we'll open it up for general Q&A, and you can ask about the topic. You can ask about whatever situation you've got going on. You can get ideas on how to work with your boss or how to set up goals or, how to welcome to corporate America. What does all this mean? I don't understand. Annual compensation cycles are coming up, so we can talk about that. Just kind of whatever you want to get more information on or get ideas on, we can talk about that. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead. Let's jump in to today's topic. So we're going to talk today about how to handle burnout. Now, those of you who are just starting your job, you probably not have to worry about this yet, but anybody who's been in a job for a couple of years or been in corporate America for a couple of years or a few years, you've probably seen people around you start to experience burnout. You've probably started to see, or you may have experienced burnout yourself. If you've been working for more than 10 years, you've undoubtedly experienced burnout at least one time, and you've probably seen lots of other people crash and burn too. And, burnout's not entirely a bad thing. Corporate America generally doesn't like it. Management doesn't like it, but these days it's becoming much more, it's being seen as much more of something that should be avoided. It's something that people are human, and this is what happens. And so when people have been working real hard for a while, they should be given a break, and they need time to get over heavy stress or heavy workload or things like that. So in my experience, there's actually a lot less burnout happening. And when it happens, it's not so crash and burny, and it's not so bad that people quit their jobs near as much. So let's talk about what burnout is. So burnout is when your body, either physically or mentally, lets you know that you need a break. And the way it does that is it's generally going to do it through like a significant demotivation. Like you're going to all of a sudden feel really demotivated. Now, it's going to be that, or if it's more physical, you're going to feel like you just need to sleep, or you might get a really nasty cold or something like that. And burnout really comes from physically overworking yourself, and this can happen anywhere in life too. This is not a corporate America thing. This is not just an at your work thing. This can be anywhere in your life. If you have new children in the family, you probably experience this on a regular basis, though you might not be at your corporate job very much. So it's really your body saying that you need to take a break, that you need to change course, that what you're doing is not something that's sustainable. And so burnout in corporate America, the reason it comes up in corporate America is because as a worker, as somebody providing service to your company, when you burn out, you're generally not really providing very good service to your company. And so that's why companies care, and that's why managers care, and that's why managers want to avoid it. There's this interesting thing as a manager is that you want to get great stuff from the people that you've got on your team. You want to help push them and motivate them to reach their goals, and you also don't want them to burn out, because if they burn out, you're not getting anything from them. And so, like I said, this is kind of something, this attitude of, if they burn out, you're not getting anything, and so you want to invest in people, not just drive them as hard as you can. That's something relatively new in the last decade in corporate America. So burnout is really just this safety reaction that your body is giving you to prevent like ongoing harm and to prevent other health issues down the road, because stress is unhealthy over long periods of time. Physical burnout, like literally not sleeping enough will get you over time. And so that's really what burnout is. So we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about why people end up in burnout. We'll talk about strategies for how to handle burnout. And we'll then also talk about what to expect as you get to the other side, because burnout generally happens and results in some changes. You generally make some changes to your life or what you're doing or what you think. So let's start with kind of the types of burnout, the types of people who end up in burnout, that sort of thing. You can kind of see it. And as I talk about this, I want you to think about the people you know who you've seen go through burnout, or you've seen get really demotivated, or you've seen get sick because they were working so hard for so long, or because of something really stressful. So I want you to think about those people, or think about yourself as we're going through these, because you'll find these like I call them profiles, these profiles of burnout all over in corporate America. So the first one is working too many hours. This is the person who is generally referred to as a workaholic. It's somebody who just work a lot. Maybe they're the person at work who they're always on their phone and they're always answering their phone. Maybe it's the person who works 60-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks. Maybe they have multiple jobs, and so just their one corporate America job isn't enough. Maybe they've got a couple part-time jobs, or maybe they're on shift work because they can do multiple jobs, and that they need to do that, right, to meet their financial obligations. But this is really physical burnout, right? Working too many hours eventually catches up with you, and you go through a physical burnout. You often will, like when you crash, when you hit that burnout crash, what really happens is that your body's just given up. You're just too exhausted, and generally you just want to go to sleep, and you just kind of disappear for a couple days or a few days because you've just got to get to a point where you're re-rested and you can get back to it. Sometimes this happens after big project milestones. Sometimes this happens after big project deliveries. Sometimes this happens after a crisis at work where a bunch of people are working really long hours. It's more likely to happen if any of those things happen around holidays or times when there's other obligations in life, because there's other things that are pulling at your time, right? There's other things that you want to go be doing as well, and so your schedule's really full, and so you start cutting corners, particularly in sleep. This can also happen when people have to start caring for someone else in the family. So if somebody started caring for their parents, or started caring for their kids because they have new kids or something like that, or a kid gets sick, or a family member gets sick, these are all things that can help lead to physical burnout that are not actually the corporate America job. So that's the first profile, working too many hours, or the workaholic. The next one is a job that is stressful. Operations jobs are very stressful. If you're a firefighter, police officer, first responder, those jobs can be very stressful. If you're in corporate America and you're in management, and you're reasonably high up in management, maybe you're director, maybe you're VP, things like that, those tend to be very stressful jobs, even if you don't really realize it at the time. And over time, stress will get you. And it's okay to have stress. Stress is an exceptional motivator, but there's a level of stress that is unhealthy. And I always found in my career that I kind of went through this curve where something would happen and I'd get really stressed out, and the people around me would be stressed out, and we'd be working hard, and we'd be dealing with something, and then I'd come down the other side of the curve. It doesn't mean I go to zero stress. It means I went to less stress. And that was like my healing time, my recovery time. And then something would happen and we'd go into the more stressful time. So the problem is really when you stay in that really high stress situation for a long period of time, your body's going to burn out because of the stress, because of the pressure you're putting yourself under. Now, stress is a mental thing, but it's also a physical thing, right? And so people who burn out with stress generally do it in a little bit different way. Instead of just like that crash and burn, you don't hear from them for a few days because they're so exhausted. Generally, people who go through a stress burnout, they'll all of a sudden build a temper. They'll start to get impatient. They'll start to, not value the personal interactions. They're not calm at work anymore. They don't have time for anybody, and that's kind of one of the groups of factors that can show you that somebody's about to crash and burn because of a stress kind of situation at work. A lot of times when you have a stress crash, you get physically sick as well. You'll pick up an illness, you'll pick up a cold, you'll pick up something, and it won't be minor. You'll generally get it, and it'll be kind of significant. And the reason is because your body's immune system is beaten down from the stress you're under. And so that's the number 2 profile. That's the stressful job burnout. Now let's talk about the third one here. I love calling this one the midlife crisis burnout because so this kind of burnout happens when you look at your life and you decide you don't like what you're doing, and you decide you don't like yourself, and you decide you don't like your future. And this is kind of the classic American midlife crisis. Now, we don't talk about a midlife crisis quite as much anymore in the United States, but this was something really, really popular to talk about in the 50s, 60s, 70s when there was this social expectation that you would have a house, and you'd have a wife, and you'd have kids, husband for those of you who are women, and there were all these social expectations for how you would behave, and you were always trying to, quote-unquote, keep up with the Joneses, and so a lot of these phrases came out of that time period. And the midlife crisis became a thing. The midlife crisis is when typically a man, because typically the man was going to corporate America, but it certainly happened to women as well. They just decided they didn't like their life anymore, and so they would do things like buy sports cars or buy expensive toys and change their behavior. They might quit their job. Just all sorts of crazy things would happen, and it was called a midlife crisis. Well, what that really was is it was really just somebody doing a self-assessment on their life and deciding that they didn't like what they saw. They didn't like where they were going. They didn't value where they were going. They didn't feel like they were contributing. I mean, it could be a whole bunch of different things, but it's really brought on by a self-assessment. And doing that self-assessment, the answer of that self-assessment was, I'm not on a good path. I don't like this path. This is a bad path. And then there'd be this crash and burn associated with the self-assessment. This is a tough one for burnout. It's a tough one if you're a manager or a team member of somebody who goes through this, because one day the person is absolutely fine and they might be enjoying their work, and the next day they're totally demotivated. They might be acting different. They might be behaving different. They might be communicating different, and it can just be this really sudden thing. And as a manager, the thing I always made sure I focused on in one-on-ones and stuff like that is listening to people, listening to them about their lives, asking them questions about their lives and where they're going and what they like and don't like. And that would often help prevent this kind of self-reassessment burnout, because the self-reassessment would happen all the time, right? But this is the third profile, third major profile. So those are the three profiles. Three profiles were the workaholic, working too many hours, the stressful job, and the self-reassessment. So the next thing I want to talk about is some strategies for burnout. Now, I've burned out personally many times in my 13 years working in corporate America. I mean, as a student before that, I'm sure I went through burnouts. I just didn't know to call them that, and so I don't think about them that way. But so all this I'm giving to you, this is all my personal experience. I've gone through all of these. I've gone through the stressful job. I've gone through the working too many hours. I've gone through the self-reassessment burnout. So I've got personal experience with all three of those. So I've also got personal experience with all of these strategies that I'm going to give you. Now, I'm going to try not to go deep in these strategies so that we have plenty of time for questions and stuff later. But so I'll just kind of crank through them, and I'm going to talk to you about. Well, let me talk about this first. There's no one strategy that works, and these strategies are not. They don't go solo. They don't fly solo, right? Often you have to kind of bring several of these together to get yourself through burnout or to help somebody get through burnout. And so let's go through these so you get an idea of what some strategies are on how you can deal with burnout. Now think about this. Remember, thinking about this in the context of somebody you know who's burnt out, or somebody who burnt out in the past, or maybe you're feeling it, or maybe you felt it in the past. Just think about these things. Think about yourself in these cases, and do a little personal reflection as I'm describing these, and we can talk about what your experience was in a little bit. So the first strategy is the physical recovery strategy. This is it's typically going to come up with the stressful job or the workaholic, right? This is I need to sleep for a while. I need to go on vacation. I need to not be at work. I need to reduce the number of hours where there's a demand on my time every week significantly. I need to get back to a point where I'm recovered and I can continue again. So physical recovery is a really important aspect of a burnout. If you're going through that self-reassessment burnout, physical recovery is not really what you need. You've got so much going on mentally that's not going to help. So let's talk about another strategy. Another strategy is what I call hobbies, introducing hobbies or spending more time on hobbies. So your brain really likes to focus. I know that you're taught to multitask, and you think you're a multitasker in corporate America. You've got all these things you have to deliver and all that. But your brain really, really actually prefers to focus than to split its attention. And a hobby, or it might be a physical hobby. Maybe you work out. Maybe you do yoga. Maybe you do Pilates. Maybe you do obstacle course races like I do. It might be you might like model railroading. You might like photography. You might like cooking. You might like reading. You might these are all hobbies, right? One really helpful strategy for somebody who's going through burnout is to focus on a hobby or to start a new hobby. Now, this, of course, has implications for the amount of time you have available, but you're going through burnout, so it's okay. You need to make an adjustment to your life, right? But by giving your brain something new to focus on, or by focusing on something other than work, other than that thing that's been stressful or whatever, it lets your brain it lets you experience some achievement and some enjoyment separate from that thing that stressed you out, and really allows you to focus. I can tell now when I'm close to burnout on a more mental kind of issue, because all of a sudden I'll start reading a bunch of books, or all of a sudden I'll start listening to a different kind of music and really getting into it. And so, and it doesn't mean that I'm about to burn out, but it's a great clue. Then I can go, oh, hey, I wonder if I'm about to burn out. What's going on in my life? And so that's the next strategy, is focusing on a hobby. Next strategy, which is one that I generally I don't recommend at all, and it's not something I would ever help someone do, but the next strategy is to literally just ignore the burnout. Some people can ignore burnout and move through it. I find that generally leads to things like resentment, disengagement long-term, the end of career advancement. Somebody's doing really well, you're advancing really well for years in your career, and then all of a sudden you don't. A lot of times it's because you had a burnout and you just tried to ignore it and power through it, right? Now, sometimes you can just basically change your mind. I'm going to skip ahead in the strategy list if you're following the post. You can go to the change your mind strategy, which is really where you just say, hey, you know what, this is the way it is and this is my life and I have to move through it. If ignoring it is really the change your mind strategy, then it works. But if ignoring it is really ignoring it, it's just going to come back and bite you later. So let's not talk too much more about that one. Let's talk about the next strategy, which is make adjustment. So maybe this is, making adjustments is really something that's going to happen as a result of your burnout. If you go right back into the same situation you were in before, you're just going to burn out again. And so most people will make adjustments as part of going through burnout. They might do it consciously or they might do it unconsciously. But the idea is that maybe you're going to work a smaller number of hours. Or maybe on a certain day of the week you're going to leave the office early. Or maybe you're going to increase your level of physical activity. Maybe you're going to change your job. Maybe you're going to stop taking a certain kind of project. Maybe you're going to improve your diet. There's lots and lots of things that would qualify as making adjustments to your life. This is another really great strategy for helping you with burnout. If the stress or if the workaholic part of you has resulted in a burnout, you may have not been working out. If that's something you normally do, you may have had a really crappy diet for a long time. So you might need to get back to a good place with those things. Okay, so let me give you kind of some final thoughts on this, because I want you to understand what you can expect having gone through burnout, or for somebody who is going through burnout that you know. So there's these different profiles of how you burn out. And based on how somebody burns out, there's some different strategies to help deal with it. Everybody's kind of different, and trying some of these strategies is what really is important. But what you need to understand is that when you go through a burnout, you're generally not going to come through the other side unscathed. You generally will have gone through some sort of change in your life. You'll have decided to make some changes of some kind. Maybe you have a new hobby. Maybe you're going to work different hours. Maybe you're like, hey, I'm out of here. I don't like my company or my job anymore. I don't know what it'll be, but people are generally not going to come out of a burnout the same that they went in. And so as human beings, as friends of people who do this, as people who are experiencing this, we need to just understand that that's okay and that that's life. And that's how we make adjustments to our life and how we should be living our life the entire time. And if we had the luxury to make some adjustments earlier, we might not have burned out. So like I said, I've gone through burnout multiple times. I've even burned out since I left Expedia in my corporate job and have been working for myself. I've gone through a couple of self-reassessment burnouts. And it's really interesting for me. I now know how I go through it. And I now know how to kind of see it coming, and so I can use that as a clue to, oh, Jeff, you need to make an adjustment. I've also gone through in the last several years, I've gone through a workaholic burnout, and I also went through a stressful job burnout. So burnouts happen, and they're okay, and you can absolutely get to the other side of them, and they're not a big deal like that. You're not broken once you have a burnout. The important thing is to just make sure that you take the opportunity to recover and move forward and make adjustments so that you don't get into that bad place again, that dark place again, either physically or mentally. Okay, so if you have experience with burnout, I'd love to hear a little bit about that. What it took for you to get to the other side. I don't want your really long engaged story, right? There's people on the call who have other questions, other things they want to talk about too. But I would love to hear from just like 2 or 3 people who've had a burnout or who knew somebody who burned out really big. And if you know kind of how they got through that or what changed afterwards, that'd be great information for the group to hear. And, of course, I'd love for you to chime in now's the time to ask about your boss. Now is the time to ask about your job or annual compensation or performance reviews, anything like that. I'm an open book, and I know that the other people on this call have lots of great ideas and experience that will be able to help you as well. Hopefully we'll be able to make some connections here. So with that, a couple people, tell me your story about burning out. Let's talk about that a little bit.